Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Roofless in Colloquium. We're super excited. Sorry about the little delay. We just had some technical difficulties with the internet, but we're here, and we're not only here, we're extremely excited and thankful that you guys are joining us. So I'm going to dive in the tutorial, and I am going to dedicate just a little bit of time since we are coming out of last week's webinar. We painted snowman. It was so interesting, and we decided to go over certain aspects of snow and what we found, and things that hopefully you'll be able to use on your painting if you continue, and if not, anytime that you paint snow, we'll be able to apply certain aspects. The first thing that I'm going to do is to go back to, let me see if I can find this painting. Go back to the Monet painting. I know that that's possibly not the best way to start the webinar with such incredible painting or the tutorial, but I wanted to bring this up just because I was analyzing some paintings. As we mentioned during the webinar, the Impressionists loved painting snow. There was a subject that they really enjoyed just because it completely changed the palette, and it just brought in different elements and approaches that they really liked. And I observed, and I also read that they were not necessarily interested in painting snow during the in the middle of the day or when the sun was like super high, because the first question that people ask about painting snow is what color snow is. And snow is a very or highly reflective surface. So the reason why Impressionists chose either early morning or sunset or cloudy days was because there was more color reflected on the snow. So one of the things to avoid when painting snow, obviously we're talking about painting outside and actually being able to choose the time of the day and what to paint. And we painted snowmen from photographs. But I found interesting to understand that since it's a highly reflective surface, painting snow in the middle of the day would really not only hurt our eyes, but it would be very hard to recognize that much color in it. It's reminds me a little bit of that the blackest black, the inventor of a pigment that really absorbs the most light, and you cannot really find differences in value. With snow, it's the opposite of that. It reflects, or it's the surface that reflects the most light. So this painting that we talked about during the webinar, it seems like it's very early in the day, but the reason why this was chosen, I cannot make it bigger. It's just because it has a lot of shadows. So to me, it's not as much about what color snow is, but what light is reflected on the snow that really matters. So I'm gonna just, yeah, and you can observe here the light purples and very light grays and very cool pale notes on the sky as well. But there's a similarity as well between the sky and the snow. And I want you to kind of like flip your eyes back from the sky and down to the where the sun reflects on the snow, and you'll see that there's a similarity on that. I would say both value and temperature. So there's also some pink, and we're going to bring some pink on our palette, and I'm going to bring some examples as well. And this is what I did that we're going to do differently this time. So I took the image that, it's going to be a little bit hard because I think the camera is not that great, but I'm going to try my best. And if anything, I'll try to explain or articulate the reason why to bring certain colors in the mixtures. What I did was I took the paper that I printed out and I actually cut out um, different segments, and all these are parts of the same photograph where snow is featured. And I'm going to try to articulate different ways to match these colors and with what I have right here. And what I'll do is I'll try to make a color right next to the sample and see if I'm able to match it. And even though the light, I mean, the camera picks up this not a very um, clear picture, I'll try to explain it with words if I can. So right here, I have titanium white, I have Portland gray medium, and that's the name of the gambling color. Um, but essentially what I have, it's a gray tone. I also have ecru, just because sometimes snow could be um, a little bit warmer, and an off-white color works best when you try to lift the value of light color, but you don't want to use white to do that. And then I have both are light neutrals. We call them light neutrals because there's both staples on our palette, our color palette, and we use them because they have a lot of white in them, but they have different temperatures, colder and lighter. This is radiant blue and this is radiant red. We try to name or associate the colors with color names. So periwinkle and salmon rose, I would say those are the closest names, color names, in case you're using different brands. But know that these are very, very useful colors. Not every paint manufacturer has pale colors. We were listening to a podcast by the actual creator of Gamblin, and he explained that these colors were not part of the initial palette, but there was a painter who commissioned the creation of these colors to um, commission the creation of these colors to Gamblin, and they were so happy about the results that they offered this palette, or they added the palette to the rest of the palette. Anyhow, so I don't know if any other brands will have the pale tones, but for us, these are excellent tones. We use them all the time. And the reason why is because they're great alternatives to white. They contain a lot of white in them, a lot of titanium white, but with a little bit of the blue and the red. So they're perfect to change the uh, temperature of the light without changing the color too much. And then what I brought, I don't know if we'll be able to experiment with this, but we will. I brought similar versions of these two colors, but in really strong, strong pigmentations. So I brought Prussian blue right here, Prussian blue, and alizarin crimson. So what I intended to do is I'm going to make colors with these two tones mixed with white. And then I'm going to try to experiment with these two tones as well with white. And what I've noticed is that some landscapes, some painted landscapes, what they did when they brought in foliage is they use analogous colors to paint tree trunks and to paint foliage in snow. So naturally, with a winter landscape, there's barely any green. So the foliage or the trees are bare, and then what takes protagonism is the tree trunk and the branches. So some painters resolve that situation by bringing colors that are similar to the snow in a way that creates a very analogous palette. Analogous means within the same color family. So sometimes a darker version of these two tones could be a perfect tone to create really dark areas on the painting. I didn't bring any browns, but we'll see if I need them. I think I have another palette right on the other side. So I'm gonna start this process, and let me see if I can find the brush that I like. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So um, yeah, I'm gonna start just with gray, because when we think or when we see snow, there are some areas of the snow that are very dark and very gray. So the first thing, when I add the gray, and when I did that with the painting, And I noticed that it was way too dark. First of all, way too dark. So when I mix colors, and this will be a great session to also talk about how I match colors. So the first thing that I do when I try to match or get close to a color is to look at the value. So I start with one or two tones, the tones that are really close to the colors that I try to match, but then I try to adjust the value. And naturally, if this is darker, I need to apply a tone that may be a little bit lighter. So I'm just gonna use pure white first um, to see if I can find a mixture of the gray and the white that gives me a tone. This is a little bit um, too light now. And this is the problem with titanium white. Sometimes it's so chalky that it may just override the mixture. I think this could be, yeah, this could be a good approximate tone to the value of the color that I'm trying to match. So what's good also when I mix colors is once I experiment with value, then automatically I can, or in a very natural way, I can find out if the temperature needs to be readjusted. So it's a two-step process. First, the criteria that I use is value, and then after that, I try to adjust the temperature. And the minute that I just compare the color test or the color sample, then I'm able to read or to pick up any change in temperature. So here, I noticed that there is I would say a little bit warmer. So I'm just gonna bring the salmon rose color just right next to it. The salmon, yeah, I think that that could be, I think that could be it. I'm just gonna put it right next, and I think that could be a good yeah, I think it could be a good match. Well, I just need to bring some of that blue. So something that I also notice is that when I match colors or when I try to test colors, if I leave a gap or if I just test the color too far away from the color that I'm trying to get close to, that white really affects my observation. So only when I put the color right next to it, I'm able to truly compare and pick up any nuances or any differences. And to me, maybe I'll just make it a little bit darker. Yeah, I think that could work. Yeah, I think that could be a good. This was a little bit too. There was a little bit too much pink, but I think this could be a good approximate color. So what I want to explain also is that what I did a lot with this assignment or premise, I mix these two a lot together. So the mixture of the blue, the light blue, or the periwinkle, and the light red just allowed me to create a great tone to add to shadows of the snow or areas of the snow where there's no light reflection. Again, it just depends on the environment. It depends on the light. It depends if the sun is hitting the snow or not. And also, I should say that digital cameras, when they pick up or they take photographs or they take a snapshot in areas where there's a lot of white or highly reflective areas, the cameras start to recalibrate and do very strange, weird things. And sometimes when I take a picture of a painting, for example, outside, and I have a white background, the background is very blue, and it just changes and alters the color. So something in addition to what I'm explaining, meaning like it depends on the time of the day, the reflection, the shadows. It also depends in the fact that we may be outside and painting snow, and we may be just uh, using a photograph as a reference. And in that sense, this morning I just got a text from someone who went to Big Bear and there's snow, and um, I'm terribly jealous. I don't think I would just go there now and paint, but today is so beautiful and there's snow, so this could have been really interesting to do. But anyhow, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see if I can also match this one as well. So I'm gonna start with the same formula, and I notice that this has a little bit more of the purple. So what I'll do again is just bring the gray and the white. And again, first thing that I check is the value. So I'm not interested in matching the temperature when I first test the color. What I'm interested in is to just see how close I can get with value. And a way to approach this, I imagine the colors being black and white, or I know this is hard to uh, imagine. And sometimes you can take a picture and then turn the picture black and white, but I just try to find out or appreciate how dark or light the mixture is, rather than just finding out how what color uh, is dominating in the mixture. So what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to bring these two tones right on top of it, because that's exactly what I did with the assignment. Rather than just bring a little bit of blue or a little bit of um, the light, what I did was to just bring those two together. And this feels a little bit too colorful at this stage. So I'm gonna try something different. Yeah, I'm just gonna bring a little bit of the ecru, and I think that works. I think that kind of works. Let me just see. I'm gonna apply on top. Yeah. So uh, the difference between these two tones, they look almost exactly the same, but there is a difference. And this happened when I got more familiar with the differences in within the same almost monochromatic scale. And I noticed that some areas they were a little bit warmer. So what I did, instead of using the titanium white, I just put a little bit of the ecru. When we organize the colors on the palette, we organize them by value. So we put the darker tones in one corner, and then as they move away from that corner, they become lighter. So one of the things that I appreciate, or that I have learned to appreciate on the palette, it's to look at the colors in addition to what the color is, to think of how much white is in the color. Because when I approach it this way, I can find colors that contain a lot of titanium white in the mixture, and I can use them as substitutes or alternatives to titanium white. And in this case, like for example, between these two tones, the blue and the ecru, this could be more of a neutral version of the blue or the red. So when I look at these three colors and I appreciate them, or I see them under the criteria of how much white the color mixture contains, I could categorize or group these three together um, within a spectrum that contains, or of colors that contain a lot of white, but they have different temperatures, warmer, lighter, and then more neutral, the ecru. So, sorry, I'm just bringing the curtain because there's a lot of sunlight. And so anyhow, what I tried here differently is that I brought a little bit of the ecru, because there were some parts of the snow right here that they were a little warmer. They were still um, these are shadows, by the way. I clipped those two sections from parts of the snow that were shaded. So they contain a little bit of the lavender and the purple, and probably uh, from live, they would have been even more colorful. But from the photograph, they felt very gray, and it was a little bit harder to pick up on the temperature. But adding this tone directly, the purple, and a little bit of the ecru just made the color richer, less sanitized or less neutered, and a little bit more dynamic. So that was the difference between what I did before, which was to do it separately and then kind of like turn the wheels of the temperature independently, and what I did with this, which was to bring the mixture together and then tweak the warmth and the coolness using either the white or, which I didn't use actually, a little bit of the white I used earlier, the ecru. So I'm just going to move to the next one. These are three highlights, and at least on my image, there was more of a dominance on the blues. And let me just kind of start. I'm going to start with a different tone, and this is another good example of to see or to model or to explain how I mix colors. Because with these three, I wouldn't start with gray because gray was too dark for those two. But with this, I would possibly pick up a little bit of the blue, put it right next to it, and then that would be my starting tone. That blue, obviously, it's very strong, but I wanted to do this also to explain that when I approach a painting that has similarities in color, I try to um, differentiate the formula as I approach different parts of the painting. So it's very easy to just get the first batch of paint, mix it to make it close, and then just stick with it throughout the entire painting instead of creating variations. And it's normal, it's natural, but each part of the painting will give you a different variation of that color. And it's always good to almost force ourselves to start from scratch and not see the painting as um, one single mixture of colors that we could apply everywhere. Because in the end, what's going to happen is that the painting is it's going to look very flat, and the variations of that temperature will be uh, gone or not appreciate. We will not be able to appreciate the differences in temperature. So the fact that I just clipped this pieces of paper right here, it's not random. This is how I try to approach a painting when I try to deconstruct the color composition. What I do is I look at a section at a time and I start fresh. I think of what can I mix to create that tone right there, almost independently to what I did before. Um, so this is why I thought it would be helpful to actually cut up those pieces and put them separately here without associating anything with snow or figures, and do this almost like rational thought process in which observation takes center stage and association is out the door. So I'm not trying to paint anything. I'm trying to match the color. So the first thing that I would do, as I said before, is to try to match the value. So what I do is I just bring some of the titanium white after I put the after I put the color, and then completely this and the camera completely disappears with the paper. I use white paper, but it actually is different. So the camera sucks. So value wise, it's similar, but what I'll do right now is I'm just gonna bring some of the lavender because it has a little bit of this lavender temperature. So again, I'm showing you on a third iteration. I love that word. I'm showing you how I try to match colors. First, I start with something general that could be used as a basic or as a base. Um, and then I tweak the I'm sorry, I tweak the value after that using white or a color that has a lot of white in it. And then after that, I try to move the needle in regards of like temperature? Is it warmer? Is it colder? So these two colors work great for that, because they're not super pigmented. They have a lot of white in them, and yeah, they could be applied to change the variation. So this works for me in that sense. Um, yeah, I would just keep it like that. I know this totally sucks because it's really weird with the camera, but just know that it's a color that's very similar. Let me just paint on top. Maybe that could help. Actually, I need a little bit more of the pink. Oh, it's becoming really dark. So I always and constantly tweak as I create more paint. I think that's good. So I just painted it on top. And let me just do something to facilitate this because I didn't have time. Sorry, I'm just gonna put some of the putty underneath because it keeps moving and it's very annoying. Okay. Um, so yeah, I just thought that it would be okay, but then I realized that as I painted it closer, there was a little bit more of the pink, and now I see a little bit more of the blue. So there's always this slight variation within the same hue that it just depends on the particular spot that I applied that brushstroke. But it's never an exact point. There's always a narrow or a spectrum that narrows, but it's never specific. So I think that's the best way that I would describe it. There's always a little bit of variation, and it's very quantum like, I guess. When I see the paint, or when I spend time looking at the paint, observation changes the color. So the more I observe, the more variations I find. So I could just find one specific formula and then I look at it again, and then I just realize that it's not completely fine tuned and I want to change something. And that's something that will always happen with color matching. There's always going to be a spectrum that may narrow, but there are going to be variations within that could be affected by simply observing or spending time. And that's why doing a second pass on a painting, I'm going to go on a tangent, but it's related to this. It's always very good because when you go back to a painting that you already started and that has happened in a session that you closed, your eyes will be fresh and you'll be able to fine tune color differences that on the first pass you were not able to appreciate. So it's so helpful to get back to a painting, and I know that it's probably one of the hardest things to do, to find the energy to continue working on something. But know that when you do, you're just going to elevate the painting so much more because you'll be able to find um, fine tune colors that were that seemed very evident on the first pass, but only when you go back to the painting you'll realize that they were not exactly where you wanted them. So I'm just going to move to the next two sections, and these were under the sun, parts of the photograph of snow, photographed snow that were under the sun. So I'm going to do another thing that's going to be completely different, and that's going to be starting from, let me just possibly clean this brush, um, but starting from white. So my color base right now, it's not gray. In other words, I move from gray to blue and now I'm moving to white. And then again, I just want to reinforce this idea that just because we're painting a single material that's everywhere, and apply this to anything: skin, fabric, hair. We make one formula for everything and then we apply it everywhere, and then we call it a day. And it's not exactly like that. Every single part of that section or that material will have a different quality. So this explains hopefully, or it becomes an example of my color uh, decision making process, I guess, when I use color within the same material. So with this, I would start with white, but obviously it's not white. There is a little bit of blue. So not only there's a little bit of blue, but here I have to be super careful because I know that if I mix these two tones when I did, the resulting color was much darker than I expected. And it's normal because even though they have a lot of white, there is still pigment, and blue and red are really dark pigments. So when I mix these two, I'm not gonna create a perfect version of those two mixed together um, based on temperature. Because of the actual pigment, I'm gonna create something that's gonna be darker. So if I just put a little bit of blue and a little bit of this color of the uh, pink, wow, that's way too dark and way too pink. So that proves that these two colors are great. They are excellent at giving us different temperatures. But when we're painting snow, which uh, and essentially means using high key colors, and high key means very light, very pastel like. I have to be careful because they could darken the paint really fast. And that's something that happens with snow paintings. One of the things that um, I appreciate when I see the snow paintings of Impressionists is the fact that they were able to bring a lot of white in their palette. So they kept the colors very pale. And unless we are not careful about this, we're going to start darkening the snow colors, and then we're going to feel, wait a second, how come my painting's becoming darker and darker? And the reason is because we may just see color and understand color as light, when in fact the paint has pigment, and when we mix it, it's just going to get darker. So lots of white paint, and that's what we used on the premise, lots of white paint without forgetting the colors that we want to mix in. And this is starting to get a little bit off. Well, let me see, I'm just going to put it on top and see. Well, it needs much more white, so I can tell you that. And it needs a little bit of blue. Okay, so I think that could be a good tone, and it's really hard to see, but it's really hard to see because of the camera. I think that's good. Yeah. So this is something that I found with my process as well, and that's why I'm having so much fun experimenting and talking about this. I on the first pass, I had a great difficulty in making the lighter stone much lighter. I kept putting white and it wasn't becoming lighter. So I what happens with oil is that we go from darker to lighter for the precise reason that it's easier to put lighter pigment or white over anything that's dark. But with something that it's so high key, we need to put a lot more white. So it makes more sense to rely on the highlights on a second pass than trying to almost like stubbornly make the areas as light as possible, because it's just going to be a little bit hard to do that on a first pass. If you're using Gall Kit, for example, that may facilitate creating lighter lights um, because it dries faster. But yeah, with paintings that have a lot of pale tones that are very high key, um, I recommend to just wait, even if it's one day and you don't use Gall Kit. The paint will be a little bit more settled, and you can apply highlights on top of it. So this would be my version of that color. I thought it was gonna be, yeah, I think that's gonna be it. Possibly a little bit more white. And finally, what I'm gonna do is I left the lighter one to the end because sometimes we think, okay, it's no. So you know what? I'm just gonna put white, and we just put white, and it's actually not white. So that's why I just wanted to bring this tone. It looks white on the camera, I'm sorry. Just because, sorry, sometimes we associate color with subject. We do that with blue sky, green leaves, brown trunk, green grass. And that association is so strong that what we do is, okay, snow, white. We put white and then we're done. And in fact, it's not exactly white. It has a little bit of temperature. So in this case, there's a little bit of a mixture between those two. Yeah, absolutely. So this is so much better, so much better. And again, the camera sucks big time. But what I did was to bring a bit of these two tones together, and it just breaks up that neutral aspect of the titanium white. Because sometimes, most of the time, it's not exactly the color that we associate it with. It's there's a little bit of a difference there. So, and finally, what I'll do is, oh my gosh, that's so nuts. I'm sorry that it's taking so much time, but I'm just gonna mix these two for fun. Prussian blue, and this could be, by the way, a good color to add to certain areas that are darker, but we don't want to use something that's too opposite of the cooler temperature. And sometimes this feels almost too blue. So I've seen paintings in which the artist mixes a little bit of the opposite, alizarin, opposite in temperature, and this could give you a really nice tone. I'm gonna bring some white, kind of like Arctic tone to mix or to bring on the images. Reminds me of the almost of the Manet shadow on the snow. So this could be a good combination. We didn't use these two tones on the palette. I didn't bring them, but since I saw some painters using it, and I saw the painting of um, Monet. I'm sorry, I said Monet. I think Monet. So I just wanted to bring those two tones and show you what an amazing combination of colors those two, alizarin crimson and Prussian blue, can make in order to bring to a snow scene. What I've also noticed in some of those impressionist paintings is the fact that the artists, what they did was to look at the most colorful part of the snow, the most colorful part of the snow, and just turn up the color a little bit. And I think that's a good idea, because sometimes with snow, the shadows and the shaded areas could be a little bit too dull. So it's not a bad idea to pick up on one of the most colorful parts of that snow and just carry that color to other parts. It's a way of like turning up the color slightly without making it too colorful. But I've noticed that some of the artists sort of like use that effect to enhance that idea. I'm just gonna bring this. I don't know what's wrong with my, yeah. So I just wanted to point to that specific area of the snow, the shadow, and the fact that most likely there is a combination here, not only of a blue tone, which in my opinion it's Prussian blue, but there's definitely a little bit of red in it. So there's also a little bit of dominance. I don't know if you see this tree right on the side, but this has more of a dominance of Prussian blue and less red. And this one right here has a little bit more dominance of the alizarin crimson, which I think it's alizarin, and less of a dominance of the Prussian blue. So I think, and also I love this painting because there's a lot of ecru on the side of the building. Anyhow, so I hope this was helpful. I just wanted to bring different um, samples of the painting. I know this sucks a little bit because it's hard to pick up with the camera. And show you that I start with different bases. I adjust the value first, and then I tweak the temperature. these are the colors that I use for the snow on my painting, but I also wanted to show you that you can bring a strong Prussian blue, which we learn it's the best blue, better blue than ultramarine blue, and then alizarin crimson with which is a better red than titanium. I'm sorry, titanium red, cadmium red. And this is something we'll learn over the course of months experimenting with color. Ultramarine and cadmium red, we always thought that that was it. That was the bluest blue and the reddest red until we learned that you can make better colors with Prussian blue and alizarin crimson. So if you don't have them in your palette, please get them because they will change your life. And I'm gonna stop the recording here.